When President Obama announced his budget for renewable energy and the vast amounts of money that were going to be spent on engineering, design, implementation of renewable energy, about 7% of that entire budget was appropriated to solar, about 22% was appropriated to wind, about 60% was appropriated to biomass, and 40% of that 60% was appropriated to woody biomass. In each state, to make the renewable energy requirements and the RPS requirements, the reliance in each of these areas is going to be on biomass, and most probably woody biomass, or a combination of crop and woody biomass.
About half the energy right now, the new energy that's being built is wind. We are sort of seeing that change to a lower carbon North America. The nice thing about wind is sort of a value-added product for the agricultural community, that you put them in, and in many cases the wind turbines, the revenue the wind turbines generate for the landowners is far more than the crops. And so, you know, it's a big deal in terms of keeping people on the farm.
Frank Aspect, in 1998, took a one-person company himself who wanted to be a solar distributor and turned that into a company that now does $1.5 billion a year. We made over $200 million last year. We've been on a 20% growth curve as part of this renewable energy boom for the past decade. We don't get distracted by oil and gas prices. We don't get distracted by being part of a great big electronics company. Hey, if we're not successful in solar, we're all out of jobs. If we're able to harness the power of the sun, then we're going to be able to reduce the conflict in the world for energy. It takes a tremendous supply chain to get that done. We're going to need the cooperation of the car manufacturers, battery manufacturers, storage capability. That's all very important. But gosh darn it, that's what we need to get done.
You know, our electrical system was created 100 years ago, by and large, by Thomas Edison, and it was sort of patched together. And the fundamental, the base of it was high carbon, cheap coal, gas, and oil, and inefficient. And what we're proposing is low carbon and efficient. And we're talking about something that, by and large, is the foundation for the world economy, and we want to absolutely turn it around. We want it absolutely to be completely different. And there are a lot of people who aren't that excited about it. The countries like Denmark, for example, and most of Europe, and what China and India are starting to do, is they're absolutely taking off. So, you know, we are sort of once again at the verge of a precipice, and I sort of do trust that we're going to get there, but we really are behind the rest of the world. And the great irony is these technologies all started here. One of the nice things about working with the Europeans is, you know, it is really interesting when people say, it's okay if this takes 5 years. You just don't see enough of that in the U.S. And we do have a flaw in our capital markets in the way, in the length of our business cycles. And that's something that's going to have to change.
In 1995, the United States did 45% of the solar in the world. It does less than 5% now. And what's the reason for that? In my opinion, it's a failed energy policy. The failure is that everybody was always looking for the next big thing. It's all about R&D. Hey, it's got to be about manufacturing. It's got to be about putting people to work in these growth industries and doing that on a nationwide basis. We have to understand that we need to be able to get this out to the rural areas, that this is one of the things that we've looked at really hard, is how big of a module manufacturing facility makes economic sense for us.
Everything starts at relatively small scale. So think about combined systems, you know, that can take woody biomass as part of your thermal, you know, heating and cooling. Take a look at the solar panel on every building so that you're able to integrate that in. Think about smaller scale, you know, wind generation that happens on buildings. It doesn't always have to be out in the huge field.
I've got it on my rooftop. I'm using it in my home. I've got it on the rooftop of a Federal Express warehouse, and it's being used right there. Or it's going a very short distance to be used by my neighbors.
It's looking at that localized scale, figuring out how you can distribute that energy back through the community, to the residential areas, and do it in a smaller sect, almost as a separate grid process. That ability to transport energy distances still is a huge technical constraint for all of us involved, right? I think once we break that barrier, then we can start to be very creative in our approaches and thinking about that.
And of course, on an international basis, let's figure out how we can make it attractive for some of the wind manufacturers to come back here and really go through with those expansion plans they had in the United States that had to be brought to a close. So we're sold out through 2010. Every module that we make is sold, and that's because of the strength in Europe. What we now see is the United States will be the market of 2011, and then we'll be competing on this international stage for 2012.
See, half the energy in this country that's generated is wasted by inefficient industrial process, not applying proper technology, et cetera. The cornerstone for the clean energy revolution is energy efficiency. You start everything with efficiency. We got to quit wasting energy. Second thing is every building's got to have a solar panel on. You know, it just has to. And then we've got to make our grid and our system smart so that you can move the excess power via some of the existing thing and with storage, et cetera, around the system, and all that technology is there. And then there's district heating that you can have neighborhood biomass and projects, which you have in Europe, and you have central heating and cooling in downtown areas. So the irony with all this stuff is this is not new. It's all out. This technology is not rocket science. It's being done. We just have to do it.
We are looking at a transference of forest land ownership of 40 million acres across the United States. We did over 600 interviews with the offspring of forest land owners across the United States and discovered two things. The big thing that they feared first and foremost was having to sell the forest land because of lack of access to health care and healthcare costs. Catastrophic event, everything's wiped out, I have to sell the land. The second thing they told us was they're really interested in looking at payment for ecosystem services, particularly carbon banking. So now we're thinking, okay, thermal energy creation in rural areas that don't exactly have access to solar and in those wind and solar areas, providing thermal energy for the local communities, for the residents, for the public buildings, coming from private land ownership. Well, how do we do that? So we say, we'll look at 15-year contracts for biomass supply. Your land has to be certified in order to play in the game. And we propose to bring 15-year carbon contracts to those lands. So carbon investment portfolio on top of those lands. Payment of those carbon investment dollars go direct to play for health care, health savings accounts, and community health savings accounts for the community. I love this idea of thinking outside of the box, incorporating all these aspects of renewable energy where you can get it.
What does the U.S., what does our state, what does our community care about, and what sort of sacrifices we're going to need to make to move to the low-carbon future that we absolutely are going. It is absolutely going to happen. In the workplace, we have to be committed to energy efficiency. We have to make sure that recycling is happening. We got to quit rewarding people for being in cars and figure out ways to get them out of cars. This is a 1,000-year problem, and it's going to take 1,000 years to fix. But if we don't do anything, if we don't start now, we're never going to solve the problem.